of the people who are sitting on the stage are also kind of introducing themselves to each other. This is just a filler until Martin O'Malley gets in here.
Might know me from television. So, just a couple of quick rules. Please be respectful, especially of our grassroots leaders on stage, but also with your cameras on your phones. We don't need to be blinding folks. Feel free to take some pictures, but please be respectful. Please silence your phones so that rings aren't going off in the midst of our forum. And last but not least, I want you to, again, give these grassroots leaders your love and support for having the courage to share their stories and ask some hard questions of our candidates. So give them some love now and when they come to the microphone. So we're ready to get started. Are you ready? Are you ready, Iowa? To introduce our first presidential candidate, Governor Martin O'Malley, give some love to Des Moines, Iowa's own Lori Young.
Let's see if I know any good jokes. I know some jokes, but they're not appropriate for church. Good afternoon. Hi, Terry. Good. This is live, Terry, on the internet.
That's right, it is.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Lori Young, and I'm with Iowa CCI Action Company. Let me welcome you again to my hometown and the capital city, Des Moines, Iowa. Look around this space. Look at all the wonderful diversity in the room. We truly are a tapestry of America. As you can see, I am Black and I am female. And in America, those two factors alone have influenced my socioeconomic status and my human experience, sometimes negatively, oftentimes beyond my control. I'm also a single mother who raised two young Black men who today have beaten the odds because one, they are still alive at age 30 and 24. They are fully employed and they have never been incarcerated. But let's face it, that's a little bit of my story, but we all have a story. And today you're going to hear some amazing stories from wonderful everyday people who've overcome great challenges despite our government. You're going to hear stories of survival and self-determination, tragedy and triumph, pain but perseverance. We're here today because we know that our issues are interconnected. And these are the real issues that impact our daily lives in our communities. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality." Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be all that I ought to be until you are all that you ought to be. We need a government that puts the people and the planet first. government that destroys our democracy with backroom deals. So what must we do? We must work to dismantle the private prison industry, which profits billions off the backs of millions of black and brown bodies. We must shut down those greedy businesses who make billions in profits but refuse to pay their employees a living wage. We must divest fossil fuel and large corporate agricultural industries who exploit and pollute our land and water. Our families can't survive on a dead planet.
That's right.
So that's the fight that we're in, and together we can do this. And I need you, and you need me. Today we're glad to have with us Governor Martin O'Malley, who is seeking the Democratic nomination for President of these United States. Governor, today you will learn and appreciate our stories. And most importantly, you'll respond to our questions. And you have about 1 hour to do so. So without further delay, help me welcome to the podium Governor Martin O'Malley.
Action and all of you for coming out here today. It sounds like there's a lot of energy in this room, yes? Good. It's my great honor to be here with all of you and to talk about the story that we share together, the story of us, the story of all of us together. My name is Martin O'Malley. I come from Maryland. I'm the former mayor of Baltimore, the former governor of Maryland. Baltimore in the house? Yeah. All right. And in the opening remarks, so like 5 to 7 minutes, yes, so the frame thing? 4. Okay. So now we only have 3 more minutes to go. So guys, I think the genius of our nation is that in every generation we take actions to include more of our people more fully in the economic, the social, and the political life of our nation. That's what makes this the land of opportunity. That's what allows us to be able to give our children a future that's more secure and more prosperous. My background, unlike my other 2 fine colleagues who are running for your party's nomination, is not that of a senator or as a cabinet member, but as an executive primarily. And I have been at the forefront of some of the toughest issues of facing justice and injustice and race in America. I was mayor of Baltimore. I ran in 1999, not because our city was doing well, but because we had allowed ourselves to become the most violent and addicted city in America. And we were burying over 340 young black men every year, and Black Lives Matter. We weren't able to make our city immune to setbacks, but we were able to save a lot of lives. Cut violent crime by 40%, biggest reduction in crime of any city in America over the next 10 years. Reduced deaths from overdoses by 30% by increasing drug treatment. We've doubled awards to minority and women-owned businesses during that time in the city. And then as governor, I increased by 117% the award for city contracts to African-American-owned businesses. We defended all through the recession the highest median income in America and the second highest median income in America for African-American families. And unlike Governor Branstad, rather than cutting public education, we increased it by 37%. And we're thereby able to address what had been a really awful state. We made our schools the #1 public schools in America 5 years in a row, according to Education Week magazine. And we also increased funding during the recession to not only to higher education. We went 5 years in a row, or rather 4 years in a row, that a pennies increase to college tuition, and we increased funding for our HBCUs by some 37% as well. So my politics, my economics, my actions into the politics, the actions, and the economics of inclusion, including more people more fully in the success of our country. That's really what it's all about. The great Marylander Frederick Douglass probably summed it up best when he said, "We are one, our cause is one, and we must help each other if we are to succeed." That's the truth I'm calling forward in this presidential campaign, and that's why I believe Iowa is going to surprise people on caucus night by showing that in our country, the individual citizen is still the highest office in the land. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Governor. We're going to begin our interactive portion of the forum today. First, you'll hear a question from Terrell Williams from Baltimore, your home city.
Good afternoon. My name is Terrell Williams, and I'm a resident of Baltimore City. I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, in a place called Cochran Gardens.
Closer to the mic. Check that mic. Nope, not working. There you go.
I'll start again. Good afternoon. My name is Terrell Williams. I'm a resident of Baltimore City. And I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, in a place called Cochran Gardens, which was comprised of 5 buildings, 25 stories high. And the elevator in my building never worked. It was so scary going through those stairwells, trying to get to the 20th floor.
Ooh,
I saw so many things in those stairwells. I saw people rolling dice. I saw fights. I saw bullying. I even saw women getting raped. A 6-year-old should not have to see that. Sometimes I would run 3 blocks down, and there was this beautiful 4-story building. Beautiful flowers, nice shiny windows, and an elevator that worked. I'd stand out there and just watch people go in and come out. None of them looked like me. The school I attended looked much like the building that I lived in. It looked like a prison. It had windows we could not see in or out of. The books were old. There was no lined paper. And from pre-K through high school, I did not experience one science lab. I said to myself, when I have kids, they will not be raised in a place where I was raised. They deserve more. So I worked hard, and I've got what I think is a beautiful education. And I said, through those trials, I will dedicate my life to creating healthy communities for healthy families, and we're doing just that in Baltimore City. We are working with community leaders, with churches, and with private investors, bringing them together to leverage local, state, and federal funds to transform these distressed communities. We're also talking to CEOs of the top companies and saying to them, you must pay a living wage. We also started this organization I call a movement, called Turnaround Tuesday, where our returning citizens come every Tuesday and we help them with every single thing we can to make sure that they get not only a second chance, but a third chance and a fourth chance, because we don't throw away people. We need to invest, make the kind of investments that uplift all of us together. Governor O'Malley, will you, I want to make sure I get this correct. What would you do nationally to invest in Black and brown communities that have been historically discriminated against? And will you champion the necessary public investments that target those communities?
Yes. I believe I'm the only candidate seeking either party's nomination to put forward a new agenda for America's cities. It has not been since Jimmy Carter that we had a new agenda for American cities. As I see it, and from my experience as mayor and my experience as governor, there are three areas where the federal government can be hugely helpful in bringing opportunity and a higher standard of living to places in the centers of our metro economies that have been so far left behind by the recovery. What are those three? Number one, investments in mobility and transportation options. For 7 years, I worked to modernize our transportation funding, our gas tax, so that we can invest in mass transit opportunities through some of those parts of Baltimore that have been portrayed for decades on television shows. And as soon as we got the funding, then I was succeeded by a Republican governor and he pulled the plug on it. But needless to say, progress kind of zigs and zags, doesn't it? So I believe that the biggest, and studies show, one of the biggest impediments to upward economic mobility is a lack of mobility itself. So we need to double our investments in transportation, including mass transit options in our cities. Secondly, poor families are paying a larger percentage of their monthly living expenses going to housing, oftentimes substandard housing. We need to make a big investment, and I propose doubling our investment in workforce and affordable housing in our country. And related to those two, and consistent with being the only candidate to put forward a plan to move us to a 100% clean electric grid by 2050. I believe that we need to acknowledge the truth that our city centers are places where unemployment is highest and also where our energy usage and wastage is highest. There is work to be done. There is retrofitting to be done. In the early days of the Obama administration, we saw what mayors could do when given these funds. So I believe that we should make cities the center, or rather the leading edge of this movement to a clean, green design, built energy future with net zero homes, with buildings that produce more energy than they use. And I also believe that we need to double our investment in community development block grants so that mayors who know what needs to be done can do the demolition and the other things that get people back to work.
Next up, we're going to hear from Rob Adams from Minneapolis.
My name is Rob Adams. I'm from Minneapolis. My name is Rod Adams. I'm from Minneapolis. And for the past 6 to 7 years, I've struggled with long bouts of unemployment, and I've worked a variety of minimum wage jobs, doing all this to take care of me and my daughter. But through it all, I had hope. I had hope because I was a college student who was really close to graduating, knowing that once I graduated, I'll be so much closer to achieving the elusive American dream. Once I graduated, I figured out that American dream was just that, a dream. Sometimes I had to choose between eating food or paying my rent. In the wealthiest nation in the world, that ain't right. Okay, now the Federal Reserve has a mandate for full employment, but black communities, specifically in the Midwest, are struggling to find employment. And they haven't felt the effects of this mandate. In Minnesota, black Minnesotans, the rate of unemployment for black Minnesotans is almost 4 times as high as it is for white Minnesotans. The median income gap is $33,000. Okay, these disparities create an atmosphere of desperation. And once you combine this atmosphere of hopelessness and desperation with the archaic system of policing, what you create is a ticking time bomb. These bombs are exploding in the form of uprisings in Ferguson, Missouri, Baltimore, most recently back home in Minneapolis. All over, people of color have taken to the streets to say one thing, that our lives matter. Now, Governor, the feds play a direct role in the pain and suffering of these communities. By not fulfilling the mandate for full employment and not reinvesting resources into these communities, they've left people scrambling for hope. People who look just like me. What could the Federal Reserve do to fulfill this mandate, and what would you do through appointments to make sure that this is done?
In all of the appointments that I've made, and in my history of being a mayor who had to assemble a cabinet and make appointments, and a governor who assembled a cabinet, you will see a long, consistent track record of appointing people who not only reflect the great strength of the diversity of our city, our state, our country, but also people who understand that we're all in this together, that share the same basic belief that we all do better, in Paul Osborne's words, when we're all doing better. And in our state, we, for the first time ever, exceeded our goals for minority and women business procurement goals. We had the highest goals in the land, and we exceeded them in a recession, and then we raised those goals. I mentioned before that we had the second highest median income for African American families. We passed the living wage, we raised the minimum wage. We made it easier for people to bargain collectively and for better wages. I was reading on the way here, and I know you asked about the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve, I would appoint people who understand that our economy is not money, it's people. It's all of us. And therefore we must, just like our parents and grandparents before us, take the actions that actually restore common sense wage and labor policies. No family that works hard for a living should have to raise their children in poverty. So we used to keep the minimum wage above the poverty line all the time. I believe that we got away from that in the 1980s with trickle-down economics. It's time to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We need to raise the threshold to always pay overtime pay for overtime work again. Because the way our economy grows is not from the trickling down from the top, is it? You ever seen a stalk of corn grow from the tassel down? Nope. The more our workers earn, the more our workers spend, the more our economy grows. That's called American capitalism.
I'm going to shift gears for a minute and talk about foreign policy and ask you about a foreign policy issue. And this one is on a topic, a human rights situation that won't too often goes to ignore in our priorities, especially when we talk about the Middle East. And that is the fate of Palestinians.
Should tell them how to support for human rights. It's getting a standing ovation.
It is clear that both Palestinians and Israelis have suffered from their fair Yet with the Gaza blockade and military checkpoints and the destruction of farming and livelihoods and bombing campaigns, Palestinians are being forced to live as second-class citizens in their own land. Now, presidential candidates always pay tribute to our special relationship with Israel, which, as you know, comes with $3 billion in military aid every year, without mentioning the plight of Palestinians. My question is, under an O'Malley administration, would that aid and friendship be unconditional? And if not, what steps would Israel be required to take toward honoring calls for a Palestinian homeland?
I have visited the Middle East many times, and on a more recent visit, I visited not only and sat down with Mr. Netanyahu, but I also sat down with Mr. Fayyad in the Palestinian Authority. I am the only presidential candidate of either party to take the time to travel to Michigan a couple months ago to address the American Arab Institute. And I was the first presidential candidate after Donald Trump's rather fascist remarks about American Muslims. To go to be in solidarity with my American Muslim neighbors at a mosque in Northern Virginia to express my solidarity and a better path forward for us as a nation. We are probably the only nation on the planet that has the ability to continue to call people back to a two-state solution. I believe very firmly that what is in the best security interest of the region, of Israel, and the United States is a two-state solution. And however elusive that may look, we need to have the hope as Americans to peer through the darkness and realize that a new day is always possible. I was very glad to have received the endorsement of StartPAC, and I know that many of their members also share a concern for peace and dignity and respect for human rights in this very, very deep and long struggle. And to those who say that the time for a two-state solution has passed, I remember not too long ago people used to say the same thing about Northern Ireland. Catholics and Protestants, nationalists and loyalists have been fighting each other for so long that there was no way you could heal that 700-year-old wound. But with an American peace envoy, with a commitment to American principles, we were able to create a process for peace. I believe that America is best in this world when we are waging peace, and that is true in what I believe must be our unrelenting commitment to respect for human rights and the pursuit of a two-state solution, and actions consistent and not inconsistent with laying the groundwork for that.
If you don't mind just clarifying about the foreign aid piece of the question?
Yeah, and your question, Steve, look, I believe that, America's role in the world, and we are best when we exercise our powers consistently with our human values. And we need to call upon all of our allies in the world to respect those values. I mean, these are universal rights. And when we realizing how strong our relationship is with Israel, what a critical role we play, I do believe that we have the ability and the responsibility to bring people back to the table. I think your question is, will you cut off aid for Israel? What I would say is this, is that the conditions or conditions for American aid should always be a commitment to universal values, a freedom from fear, freedom from want, freedom from oppression, the dignity of every person. We have made some pretty great mistakes ourselves in the Middle East, going into Iraq when we never ever should have gone into Iraq. And thinking that somehow that when a dictator falls, there's always a better day the next day. There's a lot of work that all of us need to do in the Middle East. And there's a lot of work we need to do in our relationship with Israel, and our relationship with other people of that area, and in our relationship with the people of the Palestinian Authority. When I met with Mr. Fayyad, I was struck by just how very much like most American mayors he was, in the respect that he just wanted to provide a better quality of life for his people. wanted to show them that tomorrow could be better for their kids than today. And I think I think we need to dial up sustainable development, frankly, in all of this. I think that we should not wait until there's, a global solution to an ancient problem before we lift up the lives of young people and poor people in the Palestinian Authority. That's what I believe.
I want to pick up on the previous question and go back to the first question, because you saw the residents in the audience. For those of us concerned about the plight of Palestinians, I think many of us would see what's happening in the Middle East as apartheid. I think many of us would still see what's happening in South Africa as apartheid. And some of us would also see what's happening in American cities
referring to
as
the
racial
wall
apartheid.
that is
And so I want to go back to your first question. It's sort of linked to the aid question and ask you, how much domestic aid would you provide to deal with racial apartheid in American cities, and would you target it to the places most in distress?
Oh, yes. I mean, that's why I've come out with an agenda for a new agenda for American cities. Now, my passion is American cities. Some people look at American cities and they see only the despair, the dichotomy, the great gulf between our promise as a nation and how short we come up on that. I see cities as places of tremendous opportunity to save lives, to redeem lives, to make lives better. And that's what I've dedicated my life to. So yes, the targeting of those transportation dollars, CDBG, all of that would be about addressing the growing injustices, structural unemployment, and many cities. Police brutality. Yeah. None of these things go away by themselves. They require us to take these actions, and that's what we need to do. The good thing is that we've actually discovered in many places things that actually work to address these challenges. Some of them we started to do early on in the administration before we got saddled with this very unrepresentative House of Representatives, but we haven't done it at the scale that's necessary in order to actually address structural poverty. And on the issue of police brutality, there are things that we can do with greater openness and transparency that I've called for in a new agenda for criminal justice reform. Among them, requiring all departments to report just like they do the top 7 UCR crimes, lethal force, discourtesy, and excessive force, so that everyone can see whether we're doing any better this year than we are.
From right there in Des Moines, Iowa.
Hi, preach for all and God's joy. My name is Rashawn Coco, and I'm a single parent of 4, and particularly a sole caregiver and provider for a special needs joy named Deshawn. Since arriving in Des Moines some 6 years ago, I've been in constant pursuit of my education. I'm standing here today with concerns with equal pay and affordable child care. I worked for an insurance company here in Des Moines for about 5 years, and while working there, I received less than hourly than my white male and white female co-workers. After working at that company for 2 years, I received my first raise. It was 10 cents. I went from $14 an hour to $14.10 an hour. While I was working at the company, I was also receiving a subsidy for child care assistance while working towards my bachelor's degree. Well, that subsidy was reduced and ultimately discontinued because that 10 cents disqualified me.
That's whacked.
Based off of child care guidelines. Lovingly, I meet the challenges of the emotional challenges of raising a child, especially as Deshawn, with courage. I meet the academic challenges of being an adult learner frustratingly. I face the challenges of having to pay $185 a week for child care for a child, as well as meeting the basic needs for providing for my family. Governor, they tell me that if I get an education, I am guaranteed a good salary, a livable salary. I question you today. What are you going to do? And how are you going to make child care work for a person like me who desires only to make a better life for someone else?
Thank you. I believe that raising thresholds in recognition of the fact that our economy is changing all the time, especially when it comes to things like basic, tenant support and child care. I work to increase child care investments in child care and protect them from cuts when I was governor. And as mayor, I certainly saw the impacts when another governor cut those things. So I believe we need to do a lot better job on child care. I believe that we need to increase subsidies to child care, and we need to do it in such a way that it's tiered so that people don't find that they lose those supports if they in fact get a raise at work, or if we raise the minimum wage. That's true kind of across the board. Nothing happens in isolation, right? It's an ecosystem. And sometimes too often in our government we have two steeds, on and off. And we're not adaptable enough and flexible enough to make sure that these supports are actually there to help people get on their feet, not a trapdoor to pull out from under. You touched a little bit on higher education. A lot of our people now have the worst of both worlds. They have a lot of debt, and they weren't able to hang in there because of starting a family or work changes in order to get the degree. And so they're paying a huge amount of debt, and they struggle even to get back. We need to change and be much more flexible in higher education. The goal should not be the growth of the institutions. It should be in degree completion. We need to create more pathways for returning students to complete their courses. We need to make greater use of online education. We need to make greater use of giving people the flexibility to demonstrate their competency, to earn the credits, and move ahead as they're ready. All of these things are part of my plan to move America to debt-free college within the next 5 years, greatly increasing Pell Grants and support.
From Dexter, Iowa.
Often we hear from Washington that free trade must be a priority between the U.S. and her trading partners. It was free trade that brought us NAFTA in the 1990s, followed by CAFTA, and that's when my community began to change. My family and family farmers in our communities had, in the past, diversified operations, raising a variety of livestock and row crops, and we had bustling rural communities. With NAFTA and CAFTA, we began to see the consolidation of the farming industry. Corporate concentration continues to increase today. Diversified family farms face a system of monoculture as we watch the monopolizing of our seed, fertilizer, and herbicides, and even farmer-owned cooperatives. Livestock is largely raised in factory farms. We have over 9,000 of those in the state of Iowa today, and new ones built consistently. We are watching the slow death of our small towns. In spite of the drumbeat of free trade that we hear with the TPP, it will just bring more of the same. It will be NAFTA on steroids. How will your trade policies reverse the devastation brought to us by NAFTA and CAFTA? And what kind of trade policy will you champion that puts everyday people before corporate profits?
Well, this is one of the great questions of our time. Woodrow Wilson used to say that economic freedom also means freedom from monopolies. We have moved to a point we haven't seen since the Gilded Age, with the concentration of wealth and power and the consolidation of corporate power. And you see it in the banking industry with Wall Street and 6 big banks controlling all of the 65% of assets there. And you see it in the resistance of some politicians to reinstituting Glass-Steagall. I'm in favor of a modern-day Glass-Steagall, and I'll tell you what else. I believe that good trade deals for the United States of America are trade deals that actually raise standards for workers and raise standards for the environment. And trade deals that lower standards for workers and lower standards for the environment anywhere in the world are bad for the United States of America and the small town of Iowa. So I am opposed to the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Hashtag flush the TPP.
And as an American, I think we should all be opposed to secret trade deals that our Congress has to vote on before we're even allowed to read.
I heard that.
3 weeks ago here in Iowa, I put forward 15 goals to restore the truth of the American dream that we share. Our economy system, our economic system I look at as an ecosystem. And nature knows that ecosystems achieve stability through diversity. Ideologues and fundamentalists believe the opposite. So one of the 15 strategic goals I've set for our country and the O'Malley administration, with your support, is to restore the guidance of fair competition to our antitrust enforcement laws. We've been looking the other way at these multinational consolidations, at the wiping out of family farms, at the concentration of corporate power, and we need to stop. Freedom, economic freedom, also means freedom from monopoly, and I intend to push back on these concentrations of power, whether it's in trade deals, whether it's here in the United States, or these awful inversions that they should call evasions that we do outside.
Grandmother, educator, organizer, and a family caregiver. I cared for my mother for over 7 years before she passed away. Sometimes I neglected my own needs to focus on hers. During this time, I left my job to take care of her. And as a result, I lost my home to foreclosure. But if I had to do it again, I would. Many women like me, we step out of the traditional workforce to take care of our children and our family members. And because of this, we are punished. Sometimes because we are not earning wages, we are also not earning Social Security credits.
Right.
Governor O'Malley. Governor O'Malley. My question to you is this. Family caregivers such as myself, what solutions do you think will help us as we retire and we age?
Unlike the Republican candidates for President of the United States who want to privatize or cut Social Security, I believe that we need to expand Social Security and offer credit for family caregivers. So that's what I put forward a plan that would actually increase average benefits paid out, and would also give credit to often more often than not women who have to drop out of the so-called labor force when they're providing the critically needed labor caring for a family member. My own mom raised all of us at home before she had to go back to work, or not had to, chose to go back to work. And so that's what I believe that we need to do. We need to modernize Social Security, not scrap it. And that's what I plan to do as president. It is on our website at martino'malley.com. I encourage you all to log on and check it out. And thank you for your question.
Next up, we're going to hear from Gretchen Malney from Missouri.
Hello, my name is Gretchen Malney, and I'm from Missouri, time, I was unable to continue with school or work, and so I went on a number of government programs, including Medicaid and Medicare. Those programs allowed me to continue to get medication I needed and to see doctors while I learned to deal with my blindness. Since then, as an advocate and an organizer, I have met countless individuals in my state who don't have the health care they need, who can't afford, don't make enough to get health care through the Affordable Care Act, and who can't even get Medicaid because my state hasn't expanded it yet.
That's whacked.
Right.
Many of these people are suffering dearly, and 700 of them die every year. In states that have expanded Medicaid, like Iowa, they're planning to privatize it. And we know that's not what the people. Healthcare is a human right.
I heard that.
And shouldn't be treated as a privilege allotted to the lucky. Governor O'Malley, while healthcare is something that is needed for almost all aspects of life, from working at a job to caring for one's family, far too few people in our country have access to it. What are you going to do to fix this?
You underscored in your question one of the things we still have to do, and that is to cover more of our people. There are a lot of people that are left out under the Affordable Care Act, and there's a lot of governors that are leaving their people out by clinging to ideology and refusing the Medicaid dollars. So we need to persuade them at the ballot box, and also by lifting up those examples of states that are actually making this work. As a governor, I have the responsibility to make the Affordable Care Act work as best as I could in my own state. We were able to cover an additional 1.4 million people with health care in my state, and half of those we covered even before the Affordable Care Act, and most of them were children. Look, it only makes sense. If people don't have coverage for the preventive care to keep their wellness in order, they're going to cost all of us more by waiting until they become so sick that they require hospital care, emergency room care. In our own state, thanks to the Affordable Care Act, we have moved all 46 of our acute care hospitals out of fee-for-service in an all-payer system where rates are set, and we have the big data to back it up, and instead now we pay the hospitals global payments for our Medicaid and Medicare patients. And last year, we drove down avoidable hospital room admissions by 11.5%, saved Medicaid $110 million. It's about access, yes, but it's also about reducing the needless institutional costs that make healthcare unaffordable so high in the United States. We're number one in that. There's another thing that we need to do, and it is this. I believe that the exclusion of as yet unnaturalized new American immigrants serves no good national purpose. I also would like to see us do more activity to craft more products that cover those first out-of-pocket expenses. Because a lot of people that do have the Affordable Care Act find they're paying out more than they were before.
To the core of the question, as president, what would you do to expand healthcare?
Yeah, I would work with those governors, and I would lift up those models of states that actually work, and inform. I mean, part of what the President of the United States has to do is, look, we're all understanding precedes action, and part of this is we have to make sure we lift up the best practices that are working in states. Contrast how much better those states are doing on outcomes, on wellness, on their economy, compared to states that are turning away the Medicaid dollars, that are disadvantaging their citizens. And that's the great power that our office, our President of the United States, has. Let's lift up what's working, And let's also contrast it to the things that aren't. We don't have room for ideology in this world anymore. We need to do the things that work, that cover more people, and we need to lift those up, support governors that are doing those things, and cajole, persuade, and especially inform the voting public in those states where governors are holding their citizens at a disadvantage. Thank you.
We will hear from Montega Simmons from St. Louis.
My name is Montega Simmons. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and with the Organization for Black Struggle. My story is rooted in the South. When my parents grew up in Mississippi and escaped communities that were embedded in violence, lynchings, Jim Crow, and poverty in search of opportunity and safety in St. Louis. They just happened to arrive at a time when a plan was being enacted to extract resources from the people in that city. In the wake of urban uprisings in the 60s, cities around the country turned to urban planners to help them develop their own urban strategies to move Black folks out of those cities. In St. Louis, the strategy became known as the Team 4 Plan. A place like Chicago was Weisberg. You already know what happened on the east side to Blacks for the last 40 years and how they were displaced and under-resourced. It was in this footprint that I first experienced criminalization and police harassment just for walking back and forth to school. It was in this same footprint that would eventually result in the murder of Mike Brown Jr. This was an explicit policy decision by local Democratic politicians. That contributed to the chronic poverty, police violence, high unemployment, poor schools, and lack of health care that continues to plague Black communities in St. Louis and cities throughout this country to this day. What commitments can you make to redirect funding from our dysfunctional criminal justice system into systems that create opportunities for communities of color? Are you willing to force the divestment of federal dollars from the militarization of local police forces and invest
There's a need for us to up our preparedness and homeland security, but there's not a need for the militarization of small local police forces. And we need to rein in, I think we need to rein in that program. As mayor of Baltimore, as governor, I was on a constant search for 15 years for the things that work so that we could do more of them to save and redeem lives, and for the things that don't work so we can stop doing them and stop wasting money on them. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the fact that we greatly increased drug treatment, and that was a huge help in bringing down crime and making our communities safer. I'm talking about the investments I already touched on before, actually increasing education investments. But there were some things that we also learned that worked, and we expanded them. Re-entry programs in our prisons. When you expand those things, they actually work. We drove down our recidivism rate by 15% over the 8 years of recession, which I do believe is the largest reduction of any state in America. By the time I was done as governor, we had not only reduced violent crime to 30-year lows, we reduced our incarceration rate to 20-year lows. In my first 52 days in office, I shut down the largest, most violent, and notorious prison, the House of Corrections in Jessup. Memo to future executives, it's always easier to do it first rather than ask the legislature for permission. I also learned in policing the police. Now, when I ran for mayor of Baltimore, and still to today, Baltimore's a majority African-American city, I was running as minority mayor, and our issue was, how are we going to improve public safety and police responsiveness? Because in our city, the story was in every neighborhood, if you called from a wealthy or neighborhood, black or white, the police always came and they always got out of their car. But if you called from a poor neighborhood, the vast majority of which were black, they hardly ever came and they hardly ever got out of their car. And so we had to not only improve police responsiveness, we had to improve the way we police the police. We affirmatively recruited the largest numbers in terms of the diversity of the force. I gave the Civilian Review Board weren't fully staffed for the first time with its own 2 independent detectives. We started doing 100 reverse integrity stings a year, and when officers failed, we were front and center announcing the failure so that people had the trust that we were actually doing what we say when it comes to policing our police. And I also, not the first try, not the second try, but the third try, became the first governor south of the Mason-Dixon line to repeal the death penalty, which doesn't work, is unjust, and takes away.
To talk about the broken immigration. And you just mentioned executive action. What we do know is this administration for executive action has deported more immigrants than any other administration in modern times, including over the last several weeks during the holiday season. How will you fix our broken immigration system and to keep it 100, as they say? Distinguish your plan to fix our broken immigration system from our 2 other Democratic candidates for president.
Jorge Ramos has said that I have put forward the most comprehensive and progressive immigration reform plan of any of the candidates running for president. I truly believe that these mindless deportation policies, I said earlier, that sometimes the government, I learned this as an executive, as a modern leader, taking over some pretty moribund organizations and making them perform at higher levels, creating feedback loops so we know what's going on. I don't believe those feedback loops exist where ICE is concerned. And I believe we need to stop these mindless deportation policies.
Immigration That's getting a standing ovation.
I also believe that we need to shut down these shameful for-profit prisons that are maintain the largest system of immigrant detention camps in the world, and we need to get I also believe that it is inconsistent with our principles as a free people, as a nation of nations and as a nation of immigrants, that we would ever shut our doors on refugee families, whether they're fleeing genocide. Jesus himself was a refugee child fleeing death camps at Christmas time. I was the first candidate, and let us hope not the last, to call upon the Secretary of Homeland Security to reverse these cruel and inhumane policies and use his statutory power to extend temporary protective status to those Central American refugee kids who come here. And 2 years ago, when the Central American refugee kids were coming here, there were some governors in the United States, one of whom even used the phrase, he said, I hear there might be in my state. I'm going to find out where these rascals are and round them up. Like they were a pack of swarming jackrabbits instead of children with the same human dignity your children and my children have. We took a different course. We took a different course. I brought together people collaboratively, faith leaders from across the spectrum, and we accommodated 5,000 kids, more than any other state in America, in foster homes, not in detention camps. So in conclusion, what distinguishes me from the other candidates in this race? I've been consistent. I don't say to one group that I'm in favor of building more walls, and to another group I then use the term New Americans. I have always used the term New Americans. I have always kept a sign on my desk as mayor and governor from the 1880s when my great-grandfather came here that reads, "Help wanted, no Irish need apply." We were all once strangers in a strange land. I was for driver's licenses and fought for driver's licenses for new American immigrants. I passed the DREAM Act in my state, defended it at the ballot, and I do not believe that new American immigrants take our jobs. No, new American immigrants make America stronger. It's what makes America stronger. And so in conclusion, let me say to that immigrant-bashing, carnival-barker Donald Trump that our enduring symbol of the United States is not the barbed wire fence, it is the Statue of Liberty.
He's taking his jacket off. He's rolling up his sleeves.
Our final question will be from our good friend George Zornick from the Hey, George,
I was kind of waiting for the organ music.
Governor, thank you for being here. You're a tough act to follow, apparently. But, so as you know, the unemployment data that came out on Friday showed that while the overall unemployment rate was holding firm at 5%, the unemployment rate for African Americans is at 8.3%, and for Hispanic and non-whites is at 6.3%. So we've heard from you today a lot of policies that you would suggest to try to close this gap, and in fact, policies to do that have existed for some time. But there's obviously a political problem here, where I think it's fair to say that if the national rate, not just the black unemployment, but the national rate was 8.3%, we would see a sense of urgency from both parties that we do not see right now. So as president, how can you get around that political problem, create that sense of urgency, and fix a federal policy-making process that doesn't seem well attuned to addressing this problem?
Great question. You know, everywhere I go across our country and across Iowa, and I've now visited some 65 counties, engaging with my neighbors, and I talk about the future of the story that we share. The question comes up consistently in every single town. What are you going to do to work with this really divided national politics we face in our Congress? It is one of the deepest questions that we have to ask ourselves as Americans. Look, I don't have a way to go around it. I don't have a way to go over it, or under it, or hit an easy button. And what I do suggest to people that have the weighty decision that all of you have to make as Iowans in this Democratic caucus is which of the three of us offering our candidacies has the best chance at healing these divides, at bringing us together, restoring what the Tocqueville called the strength of our soft bonds. I'm not a divider. I never have been a divider. In fact, my background, my experience in Baltimore over some very deep racial and class divides was bringing people together over the toughest of issues. My experiences as governor, passing the living wage, repealing the death penalty, passing marriage equality. You know, those last two only got done with some Republican votes. I felt I had a responsibility to get to know the Republican members of our legislature just as well as I knew the Democratic members of our legislature. This is something that we need to work on together. But this is something where presidential leadership is critically important. I would never say that all Republicans are my enemies. That's not how you get things done. Republicans aren't our enemies. They're our colleagues at work. They're our friends. They're our uncles. Right? We've got to figure this out, but this much I do know. I do know that where there is no vision, it's very hard to bring people together. That's why I've been clear about laying out 15 strategic goals for our country. Cutting youth unemployment in half in the next 3 years. Getting wages to go up again for all Americans. We have to remember that we're all in this together. Some of the policies that I've articulated here, you can say we've had them forever, but we stopped using them In the economy our parents and grandparents created for those 40 years, everybody moved up. Everybody took steps forward. In the economy that came after Ronald Reagan and the implementation of trickle-down economics, only the highest percent moved forward. Poorest families started moving back. And when a nation reaches a point where wealth and power are so concentrated in the hands of so few that it's taking opportunity out of the hands of the many, there's only two paths and only two forward. One of them is a sensible rebalancing based on our common good that restores that concrete promise that wherever you start, you can get ahead. So we mentioned some of those policies, minimum wage and equal pay for equal work for men and women. The other path is pitchforks or rocks. I believe in a sensible rebalancing. I believe that President Obama has done good work to restore our economy, and we have to build on his legacy now and make wages go up now that our country's creating more jobs. And I also believe that there is nothing so divided about our national politics that cannot be solved with new leadership and with the love that we have for one another. We are a great people. We've been through divided times before. Expectations become behavior. You and I must expect that our country will become better and make herself better, because no people ever gave their children a better future by making their country weaker. That's why I'm running for president. I believe I'm the only person in either party that can heal these wounds and move us forward in these times. And I need your help on caucus night. Thanks very, very much.
He is greeting them individually. They're yelling, "Where is Clinton?" Hillary Clinton declined to appear at this event. It kind of shows her priorities. Sitting in the back row are moving to the front on the stage. And if you want to tweet that, is hashtag nod, but if you feel like it, go for it. Bernie will be introduced. Now we're saying, where's Hillary?
We got to keep the program moving. Thank you for your patience. I'm bringing up a very, very special person to introduce Senator Bernie Sanders. This young woman is the youngest grassroots leader we have with us today. She's from Des Moines, Iowa, and she's going to introduce the next presidential candidate we're talking about.
wanted us to live without fear. My mother and father came to America because of a dream. Now I share that dream. But now, I know firsthand what it's like to live with fear. Fear that I can come home and they would be gone. I got involved in this work because as a daughter of 2 immigrants, I know the struggles that immigrants and people of color in our country face. That's why I'm here today. And we're all in this room because we know our issues are connected and that these are real issues impacting our communities daily. We know we need racial justice in this country, so people of color are profiled and sometimes taken from this life way too soon. We know we need racial justice in this country so corporations can't profit from inhumane separations of families like mine. So we have a planet for future generations, not dependent on fossil fuels like the Keystone and Bakken pipeline. And so corporate agriculture no longer destroys our land and communities. We know we need to make big money out of politics, so everyday people like you and me can run for office and champion policies that put people before corporate greed and their agenda. Not just the wealthy few. That's why I'm excited to introduce Senator Sanders, who is seeking the Democratic nomination for president, to hear about the issues that matter most to our community and to respond to our questions. Please welcome to the stage Senator Sanders.
Which will demand that Congress represents the people of this country rather than a handful of billionaires. What I am talking about in 50 states in the country is what CCI is doing right here in Iowa. You are doing this. You are bringing people together from all walks of life to say that government cannot continue to be dominated by wealthy campaign contributors and big money interests. Thank you for being a model for America. What this campaign and our political revolution is about is saying that there is something profoundly wrong in this country. When the middle class continues to disappear, when people work longer hours for low wages, when we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country, and at the same time, almost all new income and wealth is going to the top 1%. That's wrong. Together, we're going to change that. What we have now is a rigged economy attached to a corrupt campaign finance system. So when I began this campaign, people said, well, Bernie, you're a nice guy, you comb your hair really well. You're a G2 dresser. But despite all of those redeeming qualities. You can't win because you don't have a super PAC. And what I said, and I'm the only candidate running for the Democratic nomination to say this, I said, I don't want a super PAC because I don't represent the interests of billionaires and corporate America.
That's getting a standing ovation.
So what we did, and to be very honest with you, it has blown me away. What we have done is gone out to the middle class and working families of this country and said we need fundamental changes in our economy, in our political life, in our criminal justice system, in immigration, and I'm going to fight for that, but I need your help. And you know what happened over the last 8.5 months? We have received 2.5 million individual contributions, more than any candidate in the history of the United States.
None of them come from corporate or PACs.
So we have already accomplished an important part of the political revolution, and we've shown the establishment that you can run a strong and, I believe, winning campaign without being dependent upon millionaires and billionaires. Working people can do it. What this campaign is about is ending the disgrace of the U.S. being the only major country not to provide health care to all people as a right. Thank you, nurses. What this campaign is about is saying we will end the disgrace of having more people in jail than any other country. And those people incarcerated, as everyone knows, are disproportionately Black and Latino and Native American. We are going to bring about real criminal justice reform for a broken criminal justice system. And what we are also going to do is to tell Alexis and her family that they no longer have to live in the shadows. We're going to pass comprehensive immigration reform and a path towards citizenship. What this campaign is about is to tell the billionaire class they cannot have it all. They are going to start paying their fair share of taxes. We are going to have a trade policy which represents the needs of working families, not the CEOs of large corporations. We are going to expand Social Security, not cut it. And yes, together, we are going to take on the fossil fuel industry. And we are going to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel, away from the Bakken pipeline, away from Keystone Pipeline, into energy efficiency and sustainable energy. Thank you very much.
Questions for you as well as two esteemed journalists. And to begin
as Minnesotans we call NOW. Thank you so much for coming. I want to first start by saying welcome to the Midwest, welcome to Iowa, and thank you. I have not decided who I'm voting for yet, but I want to thank you for being a candidate who's been the most unapologetic in my lifetime on taking on corporate interests. We came to Iowa from Minnesota, again, along with about 100 other folks, 25 leaders from Black-led organizations from throughout the Midwest. Came for a few reasons. Number one, to develop a long-term racial justice strategy. We know that the Midwest has some of the most glaring disparities in the country. We need to put together a long-term plan. Number two, to address the prison industrial complex, which you mentioned in your opening statements. It cannot continue. The over-policing cannot continue. And we need to put together a plan anchored in our communities to solve it. The last is to put an agenda in front of the candidates to help inform and influence the presidential election. I want to talk a little bit about the policing piece that's happening in the Midwest. Many of us from the organizations that I mentioned have faced high-profile cases of police violence and police killings. The names that you will recognize: Rice, Michael Brown, Tony Robinson, Quan McConnell, Kia Boyd, Betty Jones, and Jamar Clark in Minnesota. When I say Jamar Clark, many of the folks who knew him, family, friends, and others are in this room today. Raise your hand and say aye if you know Jamar Clark, know of him, or are demanding justice in his case. There was an occupation that followed the death of Jamar Clark.
Someone said Jamar, so just say.
That occupation involved taking over a police precinct, shutting down freeways, shutting down malls, shutting down airports. This is happening in cities all over the Midwest, as you well know. Following that occupation, some local elected officials in Minneapolis decided to carve out from the budget $600,000 to go directly to a police station that was directly responsible for the death of Jamar Clark, to reinforce the police station and reinforce glass, windows, and fences and barriers to keep the police safe. The community rallied to block that funding, and that proposal was pulled because of many of the folks in this room who demanded no more investment in the state. My question, Senator Sanders, is our Black and brown communities throughout the Midwest are in absolute crisis. We need a president willing to take big, bold action in the moment. On behalf of the great folks of Iowa and throughout the Midwest, we're asking you to follow the model began at the 4th Precinct in Minneapolis in honor of Jamar Clark, and divest from the tools of mass incarceration and punitive law enforcement, and create a massive jobs and infrastructure bill. Cut the cord on things that don't work, and commit $200 billion.
He's taking off his jacket.
We want a president who would commit $200 billion or more and invest in the health of our communities. Can you make that commitment today?
No, we'll invest $1 trillion in rebuilding. Look, this is the story. Thanks for your All right. Here's the story. Youth unemployment today is off the charts. African American youth unemployment and underemployment is 51%. All right, 51%. So what I think, you want a radical idea? Maybe we invest in education and jobs rather than jails and incarceration. Idea. Instead of having more people in jail than any other country, how about having the best educated workforce in the world? Now we talk about jobs. Real unemployment in this country is not 5%, it's close to 10%. Youth unemployment off the charts. I have introduced legislation and will make happen as president a $1 trillion investment over a 5-year period to rebuild our permanent infrastructure. street cleansed. All right? So yes, when I talk about a political revolution and transforming America, there will be a huge focus on the needs of our young people and creating a full employment economy. No more tax breaks for billionaires.
The question is, will you target that investment of $1 trillion to the communities, both urban and rural, with the highest rates of unemployment and concentrated poverty?
Absolutely. If we are talking about addressing the crisis of youth unemployment and high unemployment in general, by definition, it means that we need to target that money to the communities that need it the most. And it is not just, I think rebuilding our infrastructure, hiring teachers rather than firing teachers, but also helping small and medium-sized businesses in the minority communities who are more likely to hire minority kids. It's a priority as well.
While taking care of my daughter. I got behind on paying a bill and decided to visit one of those neighborhood payday lending companies. I was approved for a loan, however, I did not realize that the extremely high interest rates would result in having to take out 2 additional loans from 2 other payday lending companies to help pay each one back. As a single mother, my financial shortfall was exploited by these payday lending companies. I got caught up in a system that made things worse for me, my family's quality of life, my ability to pay child care, medical expenses, student loans. Payday lending loans have been intentionally directed towards poor people and communities of color. That's not right. There is a need to bring relief to these communities. We need to have better regulations of financial systems that do not cause economic injustice or prey on poor people, but will instead invest in making affordable loans available to everyone. No one should feel that the only option is to take out predatory loans. Building wealth should be the focus. We need an administration that will protect us from economic violence and injustice. Senator Sanders, what would you do to ensure that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and other federal financial regulators interact with communities that have been stripped of wealth by abusive, predatory lending and chronic disinvestment?
Thank you very much. So if I might, let me just tell you a brief story. About 2 months ago, I went to a community in Baltimore, largely African American and extremely poor. Unemployment about 50%, most of the buildings shuttered up. And you know what was amazing? In fact, that was a community where Freddie Gray came from. And what was amazing when you go into that community is you cannot find a grocery store. That's like the shops where they probably sell you booze and potato chips. You know what else you can find? A normal bank. Can't find a bank. The only financial institutions are payday lenders. Okay? So what are we going to do? The payday lenders, as all of you know, are involved in usury in this country.
Yeah. Usually it's just another term for financial
whether it's Christianity, whether it's Islam, whether it's Judaism, anyone knows anything, is in all cases, usury is regarded as a sin. we will fight for usury legislation limiting the interest rates that any institution can charge. The horrific behavior of the payday lenders. Some of you are paying off on credit cards 15, 20%, right? All right, so we're going to deal with that. Second of all, 24%? Okay, second of all, we need to break up the huge financial institutions on Wall Street. Establish Glass-Steagall and create a financial system which works for consumers, small and medium-sized businesses. Third of all, to be very specific about your question, Elizabeth Warren and I worked on an issue which I think is very interesting. If you are living in a low-income community, and if there are no normal banking outlets in your community. You know what I think the alternative is? Not payday lenders, I think we've got to get rid of them. The alternative is to say to the United States Postal Service, which has offices in almost every community in America, that we will use the Postal Service to get involved in basic banking services. So if you want to cash a check, you shouldn't have to pay 50, whatever the heck it is, some outrageous interest rate or fee to cash that check. You should be treated as you would if you were in a wealthier community that was a real bank. Second of all, if you want to make a modest loan, I'm not suggesting they get involved in big-time banking, but they can get involved in basic banking, which will provide a very, very significant alternative to these payday lenders and their horrific practices.
I appreciate the particular name dropping of Senator Warren. We have to share the last name. We're going to hear next from Rekha Basu. She has two questions for you. Give Rekha some love to the Des Moines Register.
Hillary Clinton, who is regrettably not here today, made the claim yesterday that when President Obama wrote his op-ed about not being able to support someone who doesn't back his gun control measures, he was referring to you. Her campaign has cited 5 votes that you cast against the Brady bill, as well as several to prevent gun violence victims from seeking civil damages against manufacturers. You suggested previously that your votes have reflected pro-gun attitudes in Vermont, which you represent. But some of your opponents wonder, where is that fierce independent-mindedness that you show on every other issue when it comes to gun? And could you talk to us about where your heart is and your position on this?
All right, so let's set the record straight in a political season, all right? Occasionally, in political seasons, records get distorted. Record. In the state of Vermont, we have one congressperson. 1988, when I was mayor of Burlington, I ran for Congress. I ran as an independent, and the longest serving independent history of the United States Congress. I ran against a Democrat and Republican. And you know what the gun people in that election said in 1988? Vote for the Republican, vote for the Democrat. Don't vote for Bernie Sanders, because he believes that we should ban the sale of assault weapons. I lost that election by 3 points. That was back in 1988, when I uniquely among candidates for that seat came out for a ban on assault weapons. Number 2, I know I'm being attacked as being a stooge for the NRA. Well, some stooge. I have a D- voting record, lifetime voting record. for the NRA. Not quite as good. Number 3, as a member of the House and the Senate, I have voted for instant background checks, and I absolutely agree with what the President is trying to do in his executive order. Which is to deal with a very common sense approach. And that is right now, while we try to improve and expand the instant background check with the goal that the vast majority of the American people support of making sure that nobody who should not own a gun is able to buy a gun. All right, that's the goal. Problem is, right now you have a situation where in gun shows and on the internet, people can circumvent the instant background check. I think that that is absurd, and I have voted to end the gun show loophole, and I want to see a situation where every person who purchases a gun in the United States of America undergoes an instant background check. I don't think that's a radical idea. Right now you have a situation where somebody can walk into a gun shop, go through an instant background check, and legally purchase guns. Okay? Walk out of the door and then sell those guns to criminals. That's called a person being a strawman. I want to make strawman process a federal law. I want to make sure that strawmen are prosecuted for violating federal law. People should not legally buy guns and sell them to criminals. I get calls in my office, as I'm sure other senators and congressmen do, from folks who say, you know, my brother I'm really worried about. I don't know what he will do to himself or to other people, and yet we're searching frantically and we cannot find mental health treatment that we can afford when we need it. I think we need a revolution in how we make it happen. So I believe, by the way, coming from a rural state that has virtually no gun control, that I am uniquely positioned to bring about a consensus of the American people. Not everybody is going to agree to this initiative, but I believe I am in a unique position to put together a consensus of the American people who will come together and say, we will do everything that we can to end these horrendous mass shootings that we are seeing, that we will do everything we can to make sure that guns do not get into the hands of people who should not have them.
I'm going to shift gears for a minute and talk about foreign affairs, and in particular, the role of U.S. foreign policy when it comes to upholding human rights and women's rights internationally. So, I'm wondering what you think that role should be, and whether you believe that in situations like Boko Haram in Nigeria kidnapping schoolgirls, or the Taliban's repression of women in Afghanistan, or honor killings, mass rapes, female theocide, female genital mutilation, child marriage, in various parts of the world, should they ever warrant direct U.S. intervention? And I'm talking about any kind of intervention, military intervention, withholding of foreign aid, diplomatic pressure, and how would you balance the line between necessary global pressure and heavy-handed intervention on behalf of populations in sovereign states that don't have a voice?
That is an excellent question. It's a difficult question. I can't be able to say that. I think what makes our country great is that we have had a history for so many years, a far from perfect history to be sure, but a history which has stood up and fought for human dignity. Now we have failed in many ways, but we have also been a beacon of hope for people all over the world. And as president, I once again will shine that torch as high as I can to say that the United States of America believes in human dignity, and we believe in social justice, and we believe in equal rights, and we will end and help countries all over the world end all forms of bigotry and prejudice. That's what I want the United States to be seen as. Now, I will also say, and broaden your question a little bit, that we talk about foreign affairs in a very dangerous and ugly world. You should all know that you're looking at a former congressman who heard what George W. Bush and Dick Cheney and others said about the need to invade Iraq. I listened to them, and I believe that they were not telling the truth. I voted against the war in Iraq. And regime change. What I believe is we have got to learn the very painful lesson of the war in Iraq. And what that lesson is to me is that the United States of America cannot and should not do it alone. We cannot do it alone. And what that means, not only on the issues that you have raised, but broader issues, that we have got to work in coalition, broad coalition. Cannot be just America. Cannot be just our young men and women engaged in perpetual warfare in the Middle East, as some of our Republican colleagues call. So when you're looking at a horrific, an unimagined organization like ISIS, whose barbarism includes sexual slavery. I don't think they think of women as second-class citizens, probably as 10th-class citizens, all right? And when we think about a group like ISIS, what we understand is, at least I understand, is that ISIS must be crushed and destroyed, but it must be done by coalition. And what do I mean by that? I mean the United States must work with other major powers, UK, France, Germany, including Russia. And what we must also do is understand what King Abdullah of Jordan has recently said. And he said that yes, terrorism is an international issue, but it is primarily a Muslim issue because ISIS and other groups have hijacked Islam and have converted it into something which it is absolutely not. And the fundamental responsibility for defeating ISIS, according to King Abdullah of Jordan, is Muslim troops on the ground supported by the major powers. And that is what I believe. So to answer your question, we have got to do everything that we can to end bigotry, discrimination against women, against gays, against other minorities. But I will also, at the same time, do everything that I can to see that the United States does not get involved in never-ending warfare in the Middle East.
Bring the issues back to domestic issues, and particularly an issue facing not only this next questioner in the South, but around the country. So next we'll hear from Keisha Saffold from Alabama.
Keisha Saffold, and I think I have the best job in the world. I think we have the most important job on the face of this earth, and probably the least respected job. And I own 2 child care centers in Dothan, Alabama. Our centers are not traditional centers in that they're open 6 days a week and they're open till midnight. And this is based off of my good and bad experience as a single parent. In my former lifetime, I was a news producer, and I worked every shift first, second, and third. And I just found from my experience, the places that were usually open the hours I needed were in bad neighborhoods, and I just felt like I had to sacrifice quality. And I didn't understand why my daughter deserved less than because her mom had to work after 6 o'clock. And so for me, because I couldn't afford quality care, it was never about finding a good child care center. It was about choosing the lesser of the evils. So one night, I got off work with my then 2-year-old by my side, and we were mugged. And it was horrific. I walked away from TV news altogether. That's what I went to school for. That's what my degree is in. And I came back to Alabama to work in my mother's daycare center, and I went to work on my master's. And we started this child care center. Today we're the largest privately owned child care center in our area. So I understand as a parent how difficult it is to be able to afford quality child care. I understand as a preschool teacher how incredibly low our wages are and how terrible the benefits, if you even lucky to get benefits, are. And as a child care provider, I understand how difficult it is to provide high quality care and pay your workers real wages. My question to you, Senator Sanders, is how can we change child care in America in a way that will be beneficial to the teachers, to the parents, and to the child care providers?
First of all, I know we're going to get out of here within an hour, right? But she really gets me going. I go on for 5 minutes.
I hope Jane's not upset that you're kissing other folks.
Keisha, first of all, thank you so much for the extraordinary work that you have done. When I talk about a political revolution, when I talk about thinking big, when I talk about radically transforming our priorities in this country, what you said is exactly what I mean. When I was mayor of the city of Burlington, when I was elected, you know what the very first meeting that I held, which is when I ended up meeting my wife Jenny, by the way, she was interested in children's issues as well. We talked about children, okay? And out of that came, to make a long story short, what was I think then and probably now one of the largest child care centers in the city of Burlington, after school programs for our kids, a community, a teen center for kids to play their loud and terrible music. But it was a very successful effort. A Little League program in the low-income area of our state, a kids' newspaper, etc., etc. But let me talk about what Keisha was saying. Talk about how crazy the priorities are in this country. Every psychologist who studies the issue understands the most important years of a human being's life in terms of emotional and intellectual development are 0 to 4. So think for a moment what we do in this country. As Keisha just said, all over this country, including my home state, it is very, very hard for working families to find high-quality, affordable child care or pre-care. What you find is that, Keisha touched on this as well, you find that many of the people hired in child care are making, what, $9, $10 an hour? Not even that. Making less than McDonald's workers, and we are entrusting them with our children in the most important years of their life. You can make the case, I will make the case, that people who work with 3-year-olds are doing more important work than college professors. Now that I've lost the college professor vote, so what we do is understand we're not living in the 1950s when dad went to work and mom stayed home with the kids. Right now, I don't know the exact number, but something like 80-85% of moms are not staying home with their kids, they can't afford to, they are out working. So what our job is to understand that when we talk about education in America, you're not talking about first grade through high school, you're talking about 0 through university level. T-shirt, and I'm not promising you we can do this in the first year. But ultimately, what we should do is expand public education. Now, right now, I have a proposal to make public colleges and universities tuition free. But on the other end, equally important, is to create a day that won't happen tomorrow. It's an expensive proposition, but it must happen. And the goal must be to make sure that every working parent with kids in this country has access to publicly funded, high-quality childcare. You know, everything gets tied together. We all know one issue is related to another issue, related to another issue. If we have real unemployment in this country of almost 10%, if we have kids who are hanging out on street corners, what about creating many hundreds of thousands of jobs by training our young people to work effectively in child care centers all over this country? Thanks again for what you're doing. It is one of the major issues that, by the way, we never talk about. Very rarely talk about. Thank you for bringing it up.
Next we're going to hear from Ross Bruder, one of Iowa's own.
My name is Ross Bruder.
Mic up, mic up.
My name is Ross Bruder. I've worked in this for the third time. My name is Ross Bruder. I've worked as a union locomotive engineer for over a decade now. You all know the unions have been at the front of the fight for better wages and working conditions. Similarly, environmentalists have been at the front of the fight to protect the health and safety of our communities and our planet. Unfortunately, opponents of both labor and environmentalists work to pit the two against each other. As a union member and an environmentalist, I work with Iowa CCI Action and Railroad Workers United, a rank-and-file caucus of railroad workers, to do both, to put the health and safety of our communities and our working economic conditions together and first. The National Internet is organizing across the country with other environmentalists, labor and railroad safety and environmental conferences, along with my fellow environmentalists. Here in the state of Iowa, what that's looked like is protecting our land, water, and resources so that we can oppose harmful big oil land grabs like the Bakken pipeline. As you know, Senators, there are movements all over the world to transition away from fossil fuel dependence. As president, what will you do to support the people working to protect the future of our planet while still ensuring quality economic opportunity for working people?
Well, thank you. Because you're absolutely right that there are reactionaries who want to pit those of us who are environmentalists against those of us who are pro-labor and understand the need for decent paying jobs. But you know and I know there really is not a contradiction. So two things. We have introduced what I am quite confident is the most comprehensive climate change legislation in the history of the United States Senate. And what that does is not only impose a tax on carbon, provide major disincentives for the production of greenhouse gases. But what we also do is put a huge amount of money into helping people who in one way or another are impacted by the transformation of our energy system. So we have got to protect those workers who may lose their jobs. Now, in terms of railroad, what I will tell you, if we create a state-of-the-art rail system, we will create a whole lot of jobs, and by the way, significantly cut back on carbon emissions. The bottom line is, I believe if we are sensitive and sensible, we can transform our energy system, we can create millions of decent paying jobs in the process, and we can protect those workers who are impacted by the transformation. That's my goal.
Our next questioner is Enrique Aguilar of Greater Minnesota.
Hello, I'm Enrique Aguilar from the Greater Minnesota area, and I'm a U.S. citizen being punished physically, spiritually, emotionally, and psychologically by the broken immigration system as it is today. My husband works over 50 hours a week to provide for my family, and I'm home caring for our 2-year-old son. With the suffocating fear that at any moment my husband can be deported. I still remember that something as simple as dropping him off at daycare was catastrophic for our family. I got the phone call that my husband had been pulled over, taking our son to daycare. He was in the back seat and I was too far with the only Minnesota driver's license to save my family. I can remember overhearing a police officer say, "I'm going to take you in and I'm going to place your son in child protection services," as if that was a solution to the problem. That was a direct threat of my family's stability. And I'm tired of living under the fear that I will be pushed into being a single mother, that my son will be forced to live without his father, and that my husband has to fight tooth and nail to be a father to our son. And I want to know, Bernie Sanders, what are you going to do to alleviate this very real fear that is hanging over undocumented families and the citizens that love them?
As you can see, that question got to stand up.
Thank you very much for the willingness to share with us what is a very personal experience. Let me answer it this way. For a start, I work closely with President Obama and agree with him on many issues. I do not agree with him on his policy toward deportation. Number two, as soon as I possibly can, we will provide legal protection for 11 million undocumented people